Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wireheads. We are on episode 39. I am Diamond Dust. I am, like I introduced on the first half of the episode, which if you have not seen, go check out the link down below. My hand tracker is not on right now, so I can't point at it. Just a quick recap on who I am. I am a streamer over here on Twitch, do stuff on YouTube, and I'm a professional GM over on StartPlaying. And my co-host...
Hello, I'm Emmerron. My computer decided to make a problem for me between part 1 and part 2 of this episode. So if you're here on the live stream, I am so sorry that this just decided to puke on me in the middle of that. But we're here now. It's working again. Thank God. It wasn't a dire problem, just a Windows problem, it looks like. So I'm Emmerron. I am also an occasional content creator over here on Twitch and YouTube. And I more often than not nowadays am pretty much entirely a professional GM on StartPlaying. So I'm happy that we've made it, as we discovered at the start of my half the episode, very nearly a year at this point doing this thing. I did not expect it to last this long necessarily.
Wow.
It's not that I wanted it to fail. It's that I'm like, oh yeah, like this will be a fun thing that we can do, and we'll probably have plenty to say for a little while. And you know, if it works, great, and if it doesn't, oh well. It was fun while it lasted. But
it just keeps going.
But what?
But it just keeps going.
But it just we're like a bad cold. We're still here despite your best efforts.
We're like the disease after eating small flying mammals. We just keep coming back. Anyway,
we just keep coming back.
I shouldn't joke about that because that happened again. So anyway, with that out of the way, though, on the first half of the episode, we talked about creating characters. And in this kind of weird, I don't know if we call it segment or like section of episodes, we're talking about like your writing in campaigns. And one of those being one of the other things that I thought about was creating the use for obscure skills. Now, chat, feel free to just start blurting it out, whatever you think of when it comes to obscure skills. But there is a group of obscure skills, and some of them are used a little bit more than others, depending on the way your character is built. But we're going to kind of look at a variety of them and like how they can be used. And I know a lot of them are over there in the education block, but there are
tech is the other one that has like a ton of skills that almost never see use.
And I'd like to start off with like what we set the stipulation for on what is considered an obscure skill. I consider obscure skills any skills that don't have any hard-coded use for normal gameplay during a session, where they are going to be made in very niche or very specific adventures. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to set on that stipulation by chance?
I think that the simplest way to look at it is, does it have a direct game rule behind it? If not, then it is obscure, probably by necessity, or at the very least is just a supporting skill. Because I feel like there are a lot of skills that do have like gameplay elements tied to them. Examples are pretty much any gun skill, fighting skills. If you're running, skills like, or we're talking about skills like brawling or evasion or whatever, these all have mechanics tied to them. Even things like perception have things tied to them pretty readily. There are specific contested roles that those are used in. But when we talk about something like bureaucracy isn't tied to any game mechanic. It is just a skill for being a skill.
I suppose though, like there is one caveat to the firearms. heavy weapons is one of those really obscure ones, just because. Well, I understand it's coded in, but like how to get the best out of heavy weapons is maybe the heavy weapons skill is maybe something I want to look at as well, because it is that one that I don't see show up at the table as often.
I think its uses are pretty, like, we can talk about it for sure. I'm not, you know,
Not
like
in great detail, but
yeah, like I see it show up every now and then. I think if we were to talk about something similar that is an X2 skill that I see almost never used as demolitions.
That's definitely on the list.
Yeah, like that's the big one that's in tech that I'm like, why is this an X2 skill if it has no inherent gameplay mechanics for the most part? There are a few after Black Chrome, there are a few that of like explicit uses that utilize it, but they are niche even then. So yeah.
So
Please go ahead.
So if you would like to follow along, we are over on page 131 in the core rulebook, which is the skill list itself. And I'll make mention of the skill, and most of the skills that we see, I'm just going to bypass for the simple fact that we see them enough. Like, for example, concentration. Concentration, you see it. I'd say you see concentration just enough that it's not obscure. Yeah, because it's used for.
It's got a gameplay mechanic tied to it too. If you get auto fire.
Yes, yeah, that was the big one, and also it has a mechanic tied to the explicit memory stimulator as well.
Yep.
And I think it also is used when trying to overcome like environmental factors when trying to do a skill as well. Conceal reveal object. Every party does this. You want to sneak? No, you are. It's just like, no, you are not sneaking your pump shotgun into the club. Well, what if I roll conceal reveal object? No. Okay, all right. I'll put my handgun away somewhere. All right, roll conceal reveal object. Or can I find obscure hidden doors?
Well, so the really interesting thing about that, I will say, is technically you can roll to try and conceal a shotgun if that is what you want to do. That is what requires a check. The thing about weapons like handguns is that they can be concealed without a check. That's what they have going for them. Whereas anything else needs to be concealed using the check. So you can try. It actually does exist.
Lip reading is one that I don't know about you. I feel lip reading's a little obscure for me in my lot.
It is. I would say that, like, probably that's more for like fixers and medias in my eyes, right? Where it's like you're in a noisy club and you want to overhear a conversation without being noticed or getting too close. So what do? You lip read.
And lip reading is also one of those that it has it's useful, but like it is one of those that's very niche, like Emmerron described, noisy clubs. Maybe you're trying to eavesdrop on what the higher up execs are talking about across the office at the water tank, or whatever is the equivalent of the water cooler in the office at whatever place you're at. Well, actually, you probably don't even get away with being at the water cooler. You might get shot on site. Anyway, you're given encouragement shocks to get back to work. Anyway.
Yes.
Just pop up turret with a stun gun.
Yeah. They took the fucking the Continental Brands Vendit Tech, where they've got flamethrowers, but yeah, instead of a flamethrower, it's a stun gun.
Cubicle number 48 and 49. This is not social hour. Please get back to work. Encouragement shocks will be administered if you do not comply. Thank you.
Encouragement shocks. I Yes, I respond so well to those. So yeah, lip reading is definitely one of those that is very like it is a little more niche, but it does come into play occasionally. But there are very specific contexts where that becomes important. The next one probably in that list that I'd say is largely pretty obscure is tracking.
Oh yeah.
When have you called for tracking at your table?
I've called for tracking when people are investigating scenes to locate where, locate maybe a direction that people were like the most recent point of direction anybody was at. Maybe like one of the other things I'll do with tracking as well is like, especially like with nomads, you might understand what kind of vehicle you're looking at, or with lawmen or whoever else, like what kind of shoe you might be looking at, other traces. Tracking, I feel, for me is not just following the trail, but also understanding the signs that you're trying to find as well.
Fair.
Partially fair. Because I take a book out of I take a page out of my old scouting handbook on tracking and how that would work out. Yeah, there we go. I bet you haven't dusted that thing off in a while, have you?
I'll be quite honest. I don't know where mine got put. It's probably, no, I think I do know where it is, and it's out in my shed right now in a box. I think I know right where it is. So yeah, it's one of those things. I don't read that thing very often, if ever.
It's got all sorts of useful information in it. I'd advise in trying times. It's also really good for learning how to make soup. Some people are afraid of it. Let's see. Body. Contortionist is because there's athletics. Athletics is used for like so many things. That.
Yeah.
Contortionist. The skill of manipulating your body to get out of handcuffs or fit yourself into inaccessible places. So let's say you want to go crawling through the vents, or getting yourself into like really tight spaces in the hot zone when you're scavenging, or doing urban exploration like some of those people do on the garden. Don't know if some of them survive. Contortionist. I don't really see this one too often at my table, but it's very much more a way for your players to possibly reach into tight spaces, get out of a bind. I've also had a player ask if Contortionist could be a way to fight brawling as well. When it comes to grapples, I'd say give the bonus to it.
I'd say give the bonus, or it depends on the context, because like we do see a Faisal's Dead or Alive actually gives Contortionist a gameplay mechanic, and by extension we can start to see kind of how they intended that to be used. So if you're grappled not by a person but by a by an inanimate object like a net or other binds like that, Contortionist is a way to free yourself from those. I've called for this before at my table as well when my players are trying to squeeze through vents and like do so quickly. I did this over athletics because it was more about, okay, how are you moving yourself through this like very tight space in order to get out of a rapidly approaching vacuum, essentially. This was like that campaign I talk about where it ended on the Crystal Palace, and the players had to literally move quick to get back to safety. It caused them crawling through an air vent to get back to a safe part of the station where they could breathe again, which was not great. So that is another way you could use Contortionist, is if your players are vent crawlers, they can go through and use that to support how well they do that, how quickly they do that, how proficiently they do that, standing in for something like athletics, or maybe even stealth if they're trying to be particularly quiet, how they place themselves is going to be far more important than traditional stealth would be.
Dance. Usually I see rocker boys take this one, or those that might have a little bit more risque backgrounds as well. Hi. But also something else that I've seen dance actually pitched for is using it to navigate laser grids.
That's a fun one. Yeah.
I've also
just do the cha-cha slide through a laser grid. Hell yeah.
All I can think of is what was it? Jack Black and oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what film it was when they were going after the guitar pick through a laser grid.
Pick of Destiny.
Yes, Pick of Destiny. Yes.
Yeah, Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny.
Yes,
yeah.
That's what
Kyle
it is.
Gass is the other guy. Yeah.
That is one thing that I think of when it comes to dance. Also on top of that, definitely really good for navigating social functions as well. Like I've seen people make the argument of like being fluid through crowds, using it that way, and I see it being reasonable enough, especially like crowded clubs. I see it fitting.
Yeah, I've called for it. I think even at my table, I think I called for it as one of the options for like getting through a crowd of concert goers that got really riled up. It's one of those things you could do to like worm your way through the crowd. So the last one that's kind of in this section that doesn't have explicit game mechanics tied to it, and it kind of surprised me when I discovered how niche this skill was when I first looked at Cyberpunk skill list. But endurance. Endurance is really niche for what it is.
I've seen it called for like in like some of the JSK adventures, and I saw it pop up in Datapack, and I think Hope Reborn.
There's a couple of moments, even in Street Stories, I think there's like one or two moments where you potentially call for it. But it's very much like you're dangling off the side of a building or doing something equally strenuous, where it's like sustained strenuous activity that you call for it. And there's generally not a ton of scenarios that call for that, and in a lot of standard cases, in my experience at least.
I've also used endurance when it comes to people having to hold their breath a little bit longer, because I think that is something there is endurance is used for holding your breath, and on top of that, I've used it for people dealing with like overly strenuous I've had it to where it's been combat after combat after combat with a group that is just like, all right, I need to check how well you guys are holding up here because combat fatigue hits. Do you have combat drugs? You don't? All right, roll me an endurance check.
Yep. No, it's definitely like there are times you could call for this. I just find a lot of people, like especially me, even when I was new to Cyberpunk, I thought that skill would come up way more often than in practice. I've seen it come up at most of the tables I've run or been part of.
Let's see.
So that's definitely one worth talking about there.
Let's see. Then the other two, that's just resist, torture, drugs, and stealth. Control skills. These are kind of I classify like all the drive-in pilots as a little niche unless you're a nomad.
I have one. Well, they're semi-niche, but they have a very explicit use. There's one in this category that is very, very, very niche.
Yeah.
Even amongst these skills, writing.
Yeah.
When have you ever called for or been called to roll writing?
I have called for it outside. It wasn't so much it had to do with a live animal, because that's what the intended purpose was for it, and it leaves me to wonder if that's for like something way off in the distance.
Rusted Chrome could have some use for it for sure, because that's more nomad centric.
I hope we get horses at some point. partially because it favored animal, but I've also used writing for when you are like standing on top of a car. If you are, because you are getting taught like riding around on a horse at full speed. Hi, gonna bring up my background, my Midwest farm girl background. Riding around on a horse at full speed is not an easy feat. I've seen like some of the barrel race, like especially if you've watched barrel races before. You are hanging on for dear life while this animal is moving at Mach Jesus, basically. Yeah. Now imagine standing on a car moving even faster than said animal, trying to get into that car while this car is swerving around through rush hour traffic along with low-hanging signs.
Yeah. No, it's kind of fascinating to think of because the skill description definitely specifically mentions like this is for riding a creature bred for the purpose, which is like, when will that ever happen in a like climatically ravaged world that Cyberpunk takes place in? So this always to me felt like one of those skills that was like hella throwaway. Even now, I struggle even through the lens of like complementary skills. I struggle to think of how I would really use this because and what you've described is just about the only way I could even think.
Ride bear.
That could be useful.
I guess depending on how big the cyber wolves are, possibly.
Yeah, possibly. Well, I mean, we can always say there are cyber steeds out there. Like that is a possibility. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those skills that even at my table, like with how open-ended I try to be with the skill list and like really get as much mileage as I can out of it. This is one of those skills that to this day, I don't think I've ever called for a riding check. I don't think I've ever once called for a riding check at my table, which is, or have been asked to roll one myself. It's the one skill I've literally never touched.
No.
Yeah.
Time to hit the fun ones. And so, fun fact, the only reason I know that these skills are like here is because they are hanging around the basically cameo of Lisa Pondsmith in the book.
Yeah. It made me so happy when I realized that was her. Like after I met her the first time, I'm like, oh, that's so cool that they just literally put Lisa in her natural environment in the book's art.
I find it quite
what
amusing.
She does for the company.
So the education skill block, in the education itself, like a lot of our edge runners come from the school of hard knocks. Okay, they do. Yeah. You grow up in the gang, or out in the nomad pack, where you maybe in the nomad pack might teach you a thing or two, like like basic basic math and science and reading. Science more of mechanical sciences, but outside that, your education like on the street, like I'd say in the case of like Emmerron's character Virgil, is very much you learn from like other people in the gang how to do the thing you do, and that's like the only like how how Virgil knows how to do medicine. Dia, she grew up in the Red Chrome Legion and had learned from, other netrunners in the Legion before she broke away. And when you have the more educated characters, like for me, I'm playing as Summer, where I am more focusing into the education block. Like, okay, what can I do with this? So we start off with accounting. This is a really good way to, like accounting itself, it's, balancing books, cooking books, and also handling, budgeting and day-to-day operations. I feel like this one is really good for fixers and execs to possibly, draw out like, okay, I gave you this much money. Where the fuck did all of it go?
The real fun part is if you take this on a netrunner and then you like go into their financial records and embezzle funds out through their network or whatever, you could do some really fun shit with this as a netrunner potentially if you like are leaning that direction. Because it describes it as like quite literally, they mentioned masking your embezzlement in the skill description for this, which is like, that's a beautiful thing. I love it. But yeah, it's very much like, it's one part social, one part like just knowing how to do the thing so you can't be found later. It's a form of like legally stealth, I suppose you could say, which is pretty
Absolutely.
interesting.
And also it's a good way for you to even possibly get intel on whoever the hell you're trying to, snoop on. Next one that comes up, animal handling. Animal handling has finally received a little bit more to do with the latest in Your New Best Friend, but we first started seeing this with Gustav in Danger Gal Dossier, especially if you had, Shepard show up in anything like that. So as more players will be able to access cyber pets, you'll start seeing animal handling come up. Definitely, if you get like an obsidian ocelot, especially if you get a cyber bear, especially if you get one of those somehow, you're gonna want to have good animal handling. Oh
So the
no!
absolute least.
What's up? What's next?
I would say, yeah, I mean, the next one up is bureaucracy, which I think kind of follows in accounting's footsteps, quite honestly. I think of them as they're not the same skill by a long shot. My wife would kill me if she heard me say that accounting and bureaucracy were the same thing. But the for those who don't know, my wife works in the accounting field, so it's one of those things where like she's very, very particular. But they do trend both toward that very corporate business person, or you're a law enforcement officer doing some kind of forensics that involve digging through the paper trail of someone or whatever. It's very office level shit, is what I'm saying. Very white collar skills to have like a high level in.
You also happen to hold the spool of red tape to get your other people caught up in, just like, Stan from accounting's getting a little too close to whatever the hell you're working on. Well, suddenly you've shifted things around. Now he's got to go through 5 other offices to get to you now. Or perhaps you're a lawman that wants to get like an immediate warrant, but your sergeant's like, well, I don't know, and then the watch command's like, well, I don't know. So finally, you just know how to get in touch with the right people to get that warrant thrown out there. I suppose like even like amongst fixers, how to cut the bullshit with some of the people higher up. Just like, look, I know you have this. I know where to find this. Let's just cut to the chase with it. And that ties in well with Streetwise if you want bureaucracy to help you with that. I suppose next one up is business. I feel business goes hand in hand well with accounting and bureaucracy, but it's very much like how you are savvy enough to know how corporations run, how different locations function, and on top of that, you can also leverage, whether it be, corporate drones or the execs themselves to your advantage.
Yeah, no, there's definitely plenty of that. And it's one of those things where like that the suite of business, bureaucracy, and accounting are like, if you're an exec, like you're just a ladder climbing, what I would say is a street level punk character most of the time in these settings, the exec piece of shit type, these are the skills you're good at. Like this is why I say that while exec as a role doesn't have specifically any stats that it needs to be good at explicitly, if you want to be the corporate ladder climbing type, you actually probably want high intelligence, because all of these fall under intelligence. So from there, from business,
I feel like Medias and Rocker Boys do better benefit from this next one, especially.
Yeah, composition is one I've called for this one actually pretty commonly when those roles are in the party, because this is to me like how well do you organize your thoughts, how well do you like apply your the kind of statement you want within your music or your writing or whatever to really come through, you know, how much noise is there, like this is your noise reduction for that essentially. So yeah, composition is more often than not, I have people roll this as a complementary skill, more than anything else. But yeah, there's a lot of usage for that within the creative aspect of roles. If your role resolves things by creating things.
Now, I've called for this one a few times, but lawmen and media criminology. Criminology, surprisingly, has some really good uses, and also it does have a few tiny mechanical uses that show up, especially now with did somebody say murder?
Yeah.
But criminology, when I look at this, especially as someone who was a CJ major, criminology is not just knowing how to investigate, but you also are kind of on the up and up about like you know when something you know when someone's like selling you something that isn't, you know, quite right. Like you know, like you know where they're selling the dope, you know where they're selling the XPDs. You happen to know that chip that you're about to pick up is actually a microbomb.
Yeah.
You also know, like, you've kind of got an idea for the MOs of like serial killers. These are things that criminology also allows for.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one of those skills that is like one of the few kind of explicit sort of expressions of soft power that we have within the overall skills list compared to you know, more generalized things like education. You know, this is the one thing where, because I've said it at my table many times, that like if you're a lawman or you're an exec and you want to like delve into your knowledge base as part of a library search or a you know, general like education check, you have the option to just do that, right? But if you are someone who either is coming from outside of that, or maybe as like your role within the company as an exec or the kind of lawman you are, maybe you aren't as classically trained on like police report organization or you know, how things get filed or whatever. So now criminology comes into play for you as well to like really dig into that.
Techs and netrunners, I tend to see this one called with you guys cryptography. This is very much your know-how of programming. You know how to use meta. You know how to use C++. C++ is pretty much gone at this point, so I think it's just meta is now the programming language of the Red.
Yeah.
You often see this with you know, for example, Peacock or 8-bit, where they use cryptography to gain a bonus when they're trying to bypass passwords or crack open files. And also text when you're trying to shut down defenses or trying to crack open, you know, computer terminals. Cryptography is also helpful there.
So something very interesting that they mention in the book that we actually don't use it for all that often at the table, at least when I've been playing or running.
Ciphers.
You can use it to cipher and encode language. So it's one of those things where you can be good at like doing some very deep analysis of what you're looking at potentially and figuring out if there's anything like encoded in the margins or whatever. That goes beyond like computer programming. You can look for actual just encoded, encrypted information within what you're looking at. So then I'd say deduction isn't really niche anymore. Like when I first came in, I think I would have said it is. It's not though.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of calls for it.
I like using it for like when players are stumped and they just need like a mechanical boost to getting pointed in the right direction. Education, yep. I feel that's like a very general, like, see if you know something about it. Like,
yeah, like I'll say, I think this one gets called for less than it should at a good number of tables. But this is your general knowledge check, is education. So if ever GMs, you want to roll a player to roll, see if they just generally know something and it's not tied to anything like their local area or whatever, that they would normally roll something like local expert or streetwise for. You can just have them roll education to see if they maybe it's like, it's the things that like I go scrolling on YouTube and I find, oh, that's a very interesting little rabbit hole. And you know, an hour later now, suddenly I'm someone educated enough in a topic to talk about it casually with people. That's kind of what that represents.
Gamble. Gamble really started showing up in Elfline's TCG, especially, which, you know, go Gamble.
Yes, my favorite.
No, don't go Gamble. Gambling, if you,
favorite.
When it comes to Gamble, though, one of the other things that I've also used Gamble for is if a player just is just like, hey, Diamond, what are the odds that I could possibly make this happen? I'm like, you know what? Roll me a Gamble check. See if you you could see what you might know. And, you know, see if they might understand how much of a risk they're taking. And, you know, I'll give them a very vague, you know, you have a very likely chance of this succeeding in your favor, or it's a 50-50 chance it might succeed. You might need to reconsider your choices here.
So, fun fact, actually, I also had a thing in Pay to Win that I actually made a use of gambling, which is there's video poker in the bar at Redline as I wrote it. And it makes it so that the players can go from having a 1 out of 100 chance to score it big on the machine to being a what is it, 10 out of 100, because they can go, basically you roll a D100. If you rolled a DV or what is it? Players can interact with video poker terminals at any time to try to win money. If they do, unless they beat a DV21 gambling check, because it's video poker, like you're not going to beat the odds on an electronic machine. You roll a D100. On a result other than 100, they lose the bet. If they do manage to beat the check, they win on a result of 80 plus. If a player manages to win the bet, the machines pay 3-1. House always has better odds. Chumba. If a netrunner manages to get into the network and delete or impede the imp that from enforcing this, they can change the odds to whatever they want, provided they maintain control of the control node for them, even make an instant jackpot. Once they do, however, the machine needs to be manually reset in meat space before producing any more money. No heist movie payoff in this dive bar. So yeah, the idea would be that, you know, you go pay out 1,000 eddies out of that machine once. Great. Like, you know, that's one of those things where the goal of that would be like, if you really wanted to do something like that where there's a table game or whatever and you want to beat the odds or be like an advantaged player at like blackjack or something, you could roll gambling checks to try that and like actually come out ahead potentially if the game is one of skill and not of strict luck. But there's, you know, there are bounds to it. But it does require context. It's like a lot of the other skills we've talked about where it's like highly contextual. Unless you're in a place where gambling is like a thing you're doing, you're probably not rolling it all that often.
Now, another skill that kind of pops up that, like, it's a mandatory skill, language. We don't often see language pop up because it's not often called for. Yeah. However, I do feel language is useful enough to the point that, like, especially if you are in, like, an area that you are not normally from. Say, you know, you are from, you know, Upper Marina, but you're right now on a job in Old Japantown, and Now, my mom happens to be fluent in Japanese slang, but maybe you are just fluent enough in Japanese that you do hear some Tiger Claws mention, start making some very, very obscure mentions, and you understand it is time to leave. It's one of the ways that I can see that being done.
Graffiti in another language also
absolutely
can be kind of read that way. That's how I've seen it used most often, or called for it at my table, is like you're in an area that's like primarily like you're saying, like Old Japantown or Little China, where there's like either Mandarin or Japanese text on a wall in graffiti, or like Spanish and some like communities in Haywood and things like that. So like, do you understand what's being said? And usually I think language, more often than not, I typically don't call for roles on it. It's usually skill base that I lean into with that one, where it's like, do you have at least a base 10? If so, you'll probably understand like basic language. The slang is where maybe we call for a role. Like, do you know it well enough to decipher what that means?
All right. Library search, I mean, it's used enough. Like,
I see it used all the time. Everyone uses library search.
Local
agents make that a pretty explicit mechanic in terms of what it does.
Local expert, this is very much more like if you're in your neighborhood, or if you're like in your like area of influence, you kind of know what's up. And sometimes local expert, I like for some people it might not be so much like a whole neighborhood. It might be like a very specific area, like with Skimmer. Her like local expert was 1 block on the university and South Night City border. Like, she knew what was going on there as she was on the fence. Whereas, Evergreen, on the other hand, she's from Little China. So she understands the lay of the land over there. Science.
This is niche as hell.
Yeah.
This has only very recently started getting some game mechanic significance, and like your what was it? No Place Like Home has some mechanics for like science, chemistry.
Your new best friend also has it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Both of them find use for sciences. I've found this most often applies when you're trying to look for a supporting role. That's typically how I've used it historically, even before those DLCs existed, because a lot of the time this is the theory of whatever it is you're talking about, whether that's like history or biology or chemistry or whatever, right? And so it's understanding context around a lot of things, and that gives you bonuses to then doing the thing, usually, right? It's not explicitly the doing of it most of the time. Chemistry is maybe the one exception to that.
Tactics. I've recently had a player that picked up tactics, and the way that I ran it is my player's just like, okay, would I have an understanding of like what these guys might do if we engage combat? And I'm like, okay, roll tactics, and I can give a player like a little bit of a advisement to, this is probably going to be their opening play, or this might be their objective when you get to it. So let's say you're approaching let's say you're approaching gang territory. You're showing up on a Maelstrom dig site, and you're just like, okay, what does it look like these guys might do? And like, for a bunch of the scavs, it's going to be very much, they're going to point in that direction, shoot, and probably run away. The enforcers, however, are probably going to get behind cover and then start shooting at you.
Right. Yeah. This one, it can be very useful. It just depends, again, kind of how your GM wants to utilize it. Because either it locks the GM, because like you could use it one of two ways, right? Either the GM's going to tell you kind of what the goal of the enemy might be, or within the context of a conflict, give you an idea of like, this is probably what they're going to go for. Or it can lock the GM potentially into like playing their baddies a certain way, if you roll high enough on this. You just know like that's what they're going to do.
Also, if there's trouble inbound, ways to help plug the holes to make it harder for them to, attack you. Wilderness survival.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is a
be,
fun one.
because
My brother actually wants to do a campaign based where that skill gets way, way more important.
I mean, I suppose due to cyberpunk being such a very like so focused on it being in the city, wilderness survival, it is important, especially if you have to go out to the Badlands, which we do see wilderness survival pop up in Hope Reborn, but it is one of those that like your GM should make it known that this might be a skill that someone should have. Nomads most likely are going to have it.
Yeah, I'd say of all the roles to take it, nomads are the most logical. And I'm like, I think there are calls for it within some of the ventureware, like Everest ventureware gear, potentially for like auto succeeding checks for this to like do certain things. I would probably call for this for like cooking things too if you're out in the wilderness. This makes sense as like you know how to prepare food and stuff like that, or what isn't edible. But yeah, so I think we can skip pretty much the whole fighting skills section because none of those are niche. They all just do what they do.
Performance.
Performance skills can be. I would say they're pretty straightforward as to when you roll them, but I guess like the effect that has maybe isn't as clear. Acting is one I've found myself calling for a lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to pretend to be someone you're not? Do you want to pretend to like look like you belong? You need acting. Even if that is like more deceitful type, you know, usage or whatever, doesn't matter. You're trying to pretend behaviorally to be someone you're not. You're acting. That is what you're doing by definition.
I've also used acting with a few rocker boys that are, you know, giving speech that are not so much like, you know, music performance or stuff like that, but very much more they are speech givers, they are comedians, like that. I put acting under there as well. Play instrument, I mean, this is very much if your character is a musician, play instrument.
Yeah, you're playing an instrument. You're doing. I actually had it come up in the group I'm running through Pay to Win right now. The rocker boy said, well, what games are at the Net Cafe other than Elflands Online? Because I don't really want to play that right now. I want to do something else. I'm like, oh yeah, there's Rocker Hero 7 on there that you could play, and he was using play instrument to like play the game. Because I'm like, it's brain dance, so like you feel like you're actually playing guitar. You're kind of thankful that they didn't give you one of those gimmicky garbage plastic controllers that has nothing to do with actually playing the instrument. It's one of those things that I'm like, it can be fun, but yeah, it is niche. It's not super like great. Oh, fun fact to note, because this pops up in a lot of NPC stat blocks. Play instrument can also be used to sing. That is your singing skill. So combat skills for ranged weapons. You'd mentioned wanting to talk about heavy weapons, but
heavy weapons, like, I don't see this one too often, primarily because of the cost value. But I also do feel that heavy weapons could be used to great effect as well, depending on what it is, especially because, you know, the Rhine Metal Railgun, it is an assault rifle with only a rate of fire of 4, but it can be such, or not a rate of fire of 4, but a magazine of 4, but it can be used to such great effect, though. It is very devastating. So I hope to see more heavy weapons users outside typical I splash everything over there, lol, kind of heavy weapons at some point. That's just my note on that. We also have BMG 500, which uses heavy weapons when you're doing a single shot.
Yeah. No, it's one of those that like there's a dedicated use for this. Like, it's not a mystery when you'd call for a heavy weapons check. But yeah, I agree that heavy weapons overall feel like they don't see a lot of use. I think if more people realized how useful it can be to have a rocket launcher. I think people, and how affordable it can be, honestly, to have access to one.
Oh, yes, Dakota Martin Gage.
Not just the Engage, even the Toa pocket launcher is very reasonable for the amount of damage you can do. Like, there's some really viable rocket stuff that you can do with a heavy weapon. So yeah, it's very, very good.
×2 skill as well, so it's a bit of a sink.
It is, but it's one that pays off, because none of the other weapon skills let you do like 8d6 damage with what you're firing, which is like 8d6 is a lot of d6. You are probably severely wounding someone at some point when you're rolling that many dice. So yeah,
and
so now we're on to. I'm sorry. Did you have anything else about heavy weapons?
Just the number 9.
Oh boy.
No, thank you. Just number 9, regular Jimmy Chips, and I guess I'll take a bottle of Sprite. Thank you.
Solid. We all now know what Diamond Dust's Jimmy John's order is. Welcome.
Yep.
So
sorry about that.
No, you're good. So the next category is social skills. So this one's kind of 50-50. There's some of these things are really obvious, like bribery's evaluation and the commission of bribing somebody. Conversation, having a conversation with the goal of pulling information out of it. Human perception, it's like insight. We can see what's going on around us. So all those are pretty straightforward. The first one here that really, I think, has a more niche appeal, and Ghost brought up in chat, was interrogation. How often have you called for interrogation at your table?
I don't really call for interrogation too often because it's not an approach a lot of my players like to use. But interrogation is also a good way of like bending a wrist to get someone to talk about, whatever is basically getting it out of somebody that might be a little bit of a tough nut to crack. And you also happen to understand ways to get people to talk. It can be a tough skill at the table. I don't know about you, Emmerron. Like how often have you ever called for interrogation?
It's mixed, right? Like if the party is insistent on like we are forcefully going and like pushing the issue and like making them want to give us that information, or else that's interrogation. Like that's rote standard interrogation, because it's this blurry line in some cases though between it and persuasion as to which is the more appropriate to roll. Generally though, if there's a threat of violence involved and we haven't gone to the point of a face down yet, it's face down straight up, you'll do what I'm saying or I'm gonna fuck you up and I'm pulling rank on you to do that. That's a face down, right? There's this like, it's a weird escalation almost between the three, right? Because on the low end you have persuasion where you're like actively trying to convince someone to give you intel. Then you have interrogation in the middle where you're forcefully trying to push the issue and like make them aware like this is going to happen or else. And then face down is when the or else hits, basically.
I also look at this from the other point of view of like persuasion being very much like, no, you're wrong. She's been with me longer. I think you've got this all mixed up, buddy. You very much pushing your narrative on somebody as well with persuasion. Now, interrogation, I could see someone like Fiona Hayes where it's not so much twisting an arm, but it's badgering somebody to get the answer out of them. It's not conversation anymore. It's just like, Councilman, did you or did you not vote to violently suppress labor strike workers that are on the labor strike? It is very much pushing them to answer the question or you're going to look bad.
Right. No, 100%. And I think that ultimately that is that is kind of where the line blurs over, and that's where we start to see like, but it's a more forceful line of questioning, and it's much more direct in terms of I'm telling you what I want to know, and you are going to tell me. So yeah, it's not called for super often, but it does have interplay. It's the same echelon of skill or type of skill as like persuasion, just with a lot more force behind it.
I would like to note my small Midwestern woman, Summer, does have a pretty good interrogation score, but you're going to get the most Midwestern version of questioning possible. I am so sorry.
Yeah. So beyond interrogation in this category, probably the only other one here that I look at, well, there are two, I guess, here that are a little more niche.
Personal grooming and wardrobe and style.
Personal grooming and wardrobe and style, which kind of have there's a little bit of overlap between them in the same way there is for some of those like corporate skills I mentioned further up. Personal grooming is like, how well put together are you? What's your hygiene like? What's your, your hair done like? What's your, all those sorts of things. Whereas wardrobe and style is more like, what are you wearing? How well coordinated are you in that front, essentially?
And I do feel between the lot of them, personal grooming, I feel personal grooming can kind of have a little bit more of importance, because you could still be wearing like generic chic, but if you smell like shit, you're gonna get turned around at the door.
Probably.
Like, yeah. Or you're gonna get, the Biotechnica Super Scent Blast 5000, or what? I still haven't come up with a name of the device that's over at the Hollow. Long story short, for people that need to catch up, shower in a can, but it's a large like decontamination chamber that if you have a certain pH level coming off of you, you're getting sprayed.
You're gonna get the big shower in a can.
Sick 'em.
Sick 'em, yeah. I love that that's the acronym. Honestly, it's good. So from those two, now we go into technique skills, and this one's another kind of mixed bag category. A lot of these skills are pretty. If it's tech of any kind, there are places you call for them, like pretty much by the mechanics as written. The first of the ones here that I'd like to talk about that are not explicit in the way that they're intended to be used outside of, like I said, a couple items in Black Chrome is demolitions.
Okay.
Which is an X2 skill, which is especially interesting because that's a lot of skill points to put into something that doesn't have a dedicated function within the rules as written.
And I think we start seeing that we started seeing this a little bit more with when the Gunmart Door Cracker came out. But also, fun fact, we do have C9. We finally got C9, Emmerron.
We did.
For anyone who might be wondering, yes, it's C4's advanced cousin. It's a stable plastic explosive. Very good for demolishing cover. Much better than the Gunmart Door Cracker, just a little bit more expensive. And probably a little more heavy.
Yeah.
And I suppose with demolitions, I've seen this with like bomb defusal, but also figuring out how to drop, structures. But what else could you possibly see demolitions used for?
I mean, it's probably just the more like rapid or explicit deployment of explosives in an effective way. But it all comes down, it's very contextual, which is this is part of the reason I almost never see demolitions taken, or if it is, it's taken like very sparingly, because ×2 is just it's a lot.
It is.
It's a lot to put into a skill that has nearly no function, because at least most of the other X2 skills, you could see exactly why they're X2s, right? Paramedic is a great example of that, right? Paramedic, electronic security tech, even things like heavy weapons. Like, you begin to understand very quickly why that requires such an investment. Demolitions has almost no like explicit gameplay use outside of something like C9 or Door Cracker, which are just, it's not enough in my mind most of the time to justify dropping points into that, right?
Yeah.
Unless you really want to be able to defuse bombs and things like that. So yeah.
Forgery.
Yeah, did you have any forgery? Forgery, I actually find I use forgery a little more often than I think most people would. Because document fabrication is very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to forge that ID so it looks legit when you walk into the corporate building is like fucking incredible, honestly. I've had forgery be very, very useful for things. I even gave my players a tool to make it easier for them at the start of season 2 of Neon Inferno, where like they got the ability to write NCPD badges because they had a little scanner that let them do that. So that's it's a fun skill. I do quite like forgery. There's a lot of potential uses for it. All of them are niche, but all of them are fun.
Paint, draw, and sculpt. These definitely I feel kind of lean more towards Rocker Boy's texts and medias.
Yes.
But it very much is you creating works of art that can catch public attention. Really good way to maybe catch the eye of like very, very those that are very much patrons of the art, very much those that want good looking stuff in their con apps. It's a good way to put a foot in the door if you are a talented artist.
I have a rocker boy in my Friday game actually, who rather than being an instrument, based like music based rocker boy, he plays a graffiti artist, and he loves this skill for exactly that. So yeah, it's contextual, but it can be very often called for if your characters are tied to the arts or graffiti artists or something like that, because this is the skill you'd use to execute that. Next one that actually kind of has a similar sort of, I'd say, niche is photography film, which I find like medias in particular benefit from this in the same way they benefit from competition or composition, excuse me.
Yep.
Just because it is like, how good is that image you captured? Right, whether we're talking about film or a still image, like how good is it at lending credence to what you're trying to say, the story you're trying to tell, right?
And then the last one, for me, that I don't often see at my table is pickpocket.
Yeah. I'd say I'd agree.
Usually it's very much can I steal it out of their pockets, but I have occasionally had someone drop something into someone else's pocket. Note a gunmart door cracker into a live gunmart door cracker into somebody's pocket.
Yeah, it's great. Well, it's funny. I was running bucket full of popcorn flavored kibble, and I rolled this to slip a tracker into one of the party's pockets, and no one caught it until after a bug detector started going off, and it's like, oh,
uh-oh.
Yeah. So it's pretty fun. Pickpocket it's another one niche contextual. But if you're the kind of guy who always wants to be slipping things into people's pockets that shouldn't be there, you want that skill because it is exactly what it's used for.
I mean, also very much, you could just David Copperfield someone's pistol out of their holster. Just like, hey, that's a nice watch. Where'd it go?
Yeah. All right, now follow the pen. Meanwhile, I've stolen your watch, your phone, and your keys, and now I'm walking away with all of them. Yep. So yeah, that's kind of the end of the niche skills list. I would like to say I think that all of these can be used to add flavor to characters. Even if you're not certain they'll ever get used, in the context of your campaign or whatever, especially for those of you who are GMs writing your NPCs, I think that all of these can be useful given that the NPC cares about those things. And I think you can like make that part of their skill set just in case it ever comes up, because you also never know, like the meme of humans will pack bond with anything. Who knows when the players meet an NPC that they would rather save than kill, and then suddenly that paint draw sculpt on that guy, suddenly they have a masterpiece of the crew that gave them a second chance later on that they've drawn or whatever. Weird things have happened in my campaigns that those niche skills actually do come out of the woodwork every now and then.
Hello, dear. Oh,
They don't have bottle spread, so
okay.
Oh, she's here.
All right.
She's got the JJs.
Yeah, here in just a moment, and I'm putting the 2 questions that we have for Q&A up. But yeah, when it comes to obscure skills, GMs and players, like, always ask to see like if a skill could come up in a game, and maybe talk about how that skill can be used. It helps open up like very interesting character designs, and also ways to just help change how gameplay normally goes from the typical day in day outs of certain missions.
Yep. Yeah, you have a different way to navigate the city if you're good at some of these things. And some are like the thing you keep in your back pocket for a rainy day. And when the day gets rainy, oh man, you are ready for it. So yeah, and you'll feel so cool pulling that. It might be the only time, or one of like a handful, you literally count them on one hand, kind of times you pull the skill out in a given campaign. That 1 or 2 times though, you'll feel like a badass, just being like, I can do that, and it's gonna be awesome. But that said, we kind of hit the end of that topic. So now we're going to talk Q&A.
All right.
So I'm going to alter my text here to match that. Hopefully it doesn't crash my stream again. Please don't crash my stream again.
Well, the first one's actually kind of on the nose. That I grabbed and dropped over here. So first one. Emmerron, what is a skill you want added to the game?
This assumes that there's not skills to cover just about anything in the game already. We already just talked about how writing is a skill I have never seen used. I think if I were to say there's one skill that I don't see represented explicitly, although you could argue there could be a call for you to just make this a subset of science computers.
Yes.
But I'd like to see a more explicit coding based skill than like cryptography really gives us. Because cryptography technically isn't programming, it's more just like codes in general. So having a more explicit programming skill would be very cool. But that's like the only one I can really think of that I've ever encountered that isn't like more explicitly covered by the rules as written.
I suppose for me, what a skill that I would like to look at, and I suppose this is very much more. I don't know how else to describe besides power word MacGyver. Like you have basic tech, but it's just like you are caught, empty-handed, and shit's hitting the fan, and you're looking at all the different stuff in front of you. I'm trying to think like what could that possibly fall under, where it's just like you are using whatever is at your disposal to make a better fix of that situation.
So techs kind of have that with jury rigging, because they can jury rig using their field expertise. So that's kind of power word MacGyver already. So this is why I say it's really hard, because even if it's not covered as an explicit skill itself, some of the role abilities kind of cover things like that. So that's kind of where I'm like technically Netrunners have interface that kind of does what I was just saying, but like technically I should also be able to like more explicitly look to like, I want to do like computer science to better understand the system architecture and find a way to like fuck with it, right? But
Alan, you're right. Improvise, and I feel like
improvise.
Improvise as a luck skill.
Yeah.
Where it's based on your maximum luck, and it's very much okay. You could roll improvise, and it could just be like you happen to have a glass bottle nearby. It's your gun was checked in at the door. A fight's breaking out. You happen to have a glass bottle you could smash over someone's head.
That's kind of a fascinating improvise as a luck based skill would be kind of wild, honestly.
And like, yeah, we have conceal reveal, but like we don't have like a hard like mechanical setup for like scrounging like how Fallout 2D20 does. That like I feel that could also be used on luck, where it just you can really see if you happen to be able to find something on hand. Like
that could be good.
We have flash of luck, but maybe also just like your ability to ass hattery skill, enraging people in social situations.
Yes.
Being a troll.
The worst kind of menace. Yeah, social menace, the skill. That's funny. I do like that. That is funny. This is why you come to the Twitch chat, guys. This is great.
I actually that being a luck-based skill of just like improv would be pretty good. I like that one. Taunt skill would be amazing. As someone who constantly tries to hold aggro off the party, I would look.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what you use. You can use face down like a taunt in a lot of cases there, where it's like if they think you're the one they need to prove themselves to, they're gonna come for you. Or if you advertise yourself as the biggest threat, like even if you fail that face down, potentially they're still probably gonna come for you, which is kind of like what that is. So I will say that next time you want to do that, roll face down. It's because you can call for a face down yourself. I don't need to call for it as the GM. So
and then
I think that's kind of our answers for what we would add to the game in terms of skills.
Here and then second one, it's not so much a question, but it's been a request. I need 5 weird things that an eccentric fixer is sending the crew to go find. Go.
5 eccentric things that a fixer is sending the crew to go find.
5 weird things. Well, I would say a live fish, and it must still remain alive when it upon arrival.
That's a fun one. I would say because I'm like the most awkward thing I've ever seen written in an adventure is the one where you have to go pick up cheese, like it's in an armed transport and everything. So that one's always kind of struck me in that same vein. I would say a specific limited edition agent that is 10 years out of date. Like literally, like they want you to go find like the Nokia equivalent on the agent side of things. Like, go find me this nigh indestructible model from 10 years ago.
If this is the fixer of the friend I have in mind, this is very much this guy finds the weird shit that rich people want. I suppose another possible one, and I'm throwing it out there. But maybe the box set of the finest from Mr. Stud.
Yeah, I was wondering when something like that was coming, because I was like, oh yeah, there's like some really niche like adult things that you could probably have a fixer go find, like, or charge the party with finding. Like, yes, those of you who know what Bad Dragon is. I won't say it for the purposes of getting demonetized, but those who know. And if a fixer sent you to find something from that catalog, you'd already have a very interesting conversation if you knew what they were.
So let's see. We've got fresh fish. What's the second one?
Fresh fish box set of Mr. Stud.
What's the third one?
Some very interestingly created adult toys, I would say.
Okay, all right. The Biotechnica Exotics collection for her. Okay.
Right.
Let's see.
Right.
That's what we call it.
Thinking.
Actually, Sanru probably.
Oh goddamn. Sanru.
I mean, it's all that's what they sell.
They are a toy company. But
Number
it's
4.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, what would number 4 of weird items be? Gosh.
The last ELO Sacred Herbs kibble in the city. Because I don't know if you remember this, but in Derek Seiler's Guide to ELO, there was a raid that was specifically done as a Continental Brands tie-in, and you needed to get a code from inside the bag of kibble that was released as the companion to this. And it's always changing. So after so long, the code changes, so you need to buy more of it. And the grease from the kibble tends to wear away at the ink, so it makes it doubly frustrating, because if you get a bag that has had that happen, you need to go and get yet another before the codes obviously get kind of spread around the community online, because it's like per lot there's like one code, right? But it's caused, they mentioned in there specifically, there was a shipment from Tokyo that was delayed, like long delayed for like months.
So Nomad had to go get it.
Right, and so people literally couldn't run the raid until they did that. So yeah. A lock of hair from Smashers.
Elvis. I don't know if you'd be able to find that during the time of the Red.
Yeah, that'd be pretty hard. And Elvis's body. Oh yeah, there's a cult for that.
Oh, I think I've got this one. You need to get your hands on UR's previous suit that he used to wear before they decided to go on to the next fad. The weirdest part is it's made from real animal furs.
Ooh.
Super expensive.
That is pretty niche.
And definitely stored away somewhere where you shouldn't be going.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the gig in 77 where I have to break in and steal Carrie Eurodyne's guitar back. I'm a mega fan. Which it's really fun. I didn't realize, because I've always done that mission pretty carefully. I never realized like security can get called on you so quick, and then suddenly you're surrounded by like corporate enforcers in there if you do it wrong. If you do it like messy as hell, which is hilarious.
All right.
But yeah, I think we got a list of 5 somewhere in there.
Yeah. So, that's five items for you. So we've got, the freshest fish from the fish markets. We've got the Sanru exotics for her. A box set of Mr. Stud's finest. We've got let's see, the suit made of real animal fur. What was the other one, Emmerron?
And Elvis's body.
It was the last bag of ELO Sacred Herbs kibble.
Bag of Sacred Herbs kibble that has the code for the raid in it. Yeah.
Now
they've hit another production clog. We need this because otherwise the raid is not going to happen, and this is a necessity. Please, for some gonk who doesn't even play the game gets it and eats it and just throws it away like it's trash. It's gold.
The client is Derek Seiler.
Of course course it is. Yeah.
All right. So I think on that note, that is everything from us today. If you enjoy tuning in to Wireheads, come in and hang out with us on Thursdays. Come hang out with chat. You can hang out in Emmerron's chat or hang out in my chat. We still see what you're talking about anyway, because we have shared chat. On top of that, you get to just blurt and yell shit at us while we're fucking yapping about Cyberpunk. Anyway, for those of you on YouTube, if you somehow ended up here, but you're wondering how did we get here, the link to episode 1 or the first half of the episode's down below in the about section. Come hang out with our communities. Come hang out with our our people. Come check out what we do. As always,
Yep.
Be safe out there. I'm Diamond Dust.
And I'm Emmerron.
Good night, folks. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.